The long journey has come to its end. 9 wonderful years of friendship and love, and I hope that we continue to move forward from here. What's up everyone, John Fox here with 5 picks for this week for My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, Season 9, Episodes 24, 25, and 26, The End of the End, and The Last Problem. I first joined this fandom during Season 1. I think I was a brony from the get-go. I've always kind of enjoyed kids' cartoons. I was a fan of the Winx Club, unironically. This weird new show full of charm and character and good feelings. At first, I didn't really even know there was a big fandom. I found the show through word of mouth and general exposure. I wasn't a 4chan poster or anything. I just started watching the show and never stopped. Around the first anniversary of the show, I started working on my first fan art of the show. Now, I've always been a big anime nerd, for as long as I can remember. And anime at that time was all about turning everything into cute girls. I mean, anime is still kind of that, but more so back then, I feel like. It wasn't a totally original idea. I think plenty of people had already done humanized versions of the girls before. I definitely wasn't the first. But this was my first little contribution to the fandom. And the response was great. It was the most views I'd ever received on one of my works at the time. It was like 200 views and 10 comments. I know that doesn't sound like much, but it mattered to me. Nowadays, I regularly hit 1,000 views and dozens of comments on DeviantArt, which I guess isn't really that big of a change on reflection. I enjoyed the process immensely, and it was something that felt like it mattered. I was deep in the fandom now. I started reading fanfics, watching fan videos, listening to fan music. I realized this was something big, and I wanted to be a part of it. I'm not sure I ever really made that big an impact. There were others doing better humanized pony art than I was, but that was motivation for me to keep going, to keep trying. I took inspiration from other artists. I carved out my own little niche in the fandom. I've gotten to know a lot of great artists and interact with them. I grew a lot from that. A few months after my first piece, and after spending some time in the fandom, I did another big 6-character piece, this time of all the popular fandom characters. And I had a lot of fun with it. I started to establish some of things like the wing ears and the elf ears. I started to tell stories through character design, and the response was still fantastic. Just like everyone else was writing stories about these characters, I wanted to tell my story too. So, November 2012, I had just started my second year of college, I think, and needed a project to keep me occupied. I started Ask Human Octavia in the middle of that Ask blog craze on Tumblr at the time. I don't remember why I chose Octavia specifically. Maybe it was so I could tell my story as an artist through her story as a musician. At the time we were in the middle of Season 3, so there wasn't exactly a strong canon to go from, which meant I had a great blank slate to start with. And through Octavia, I got closer to the fandom. I got to meet the other Ask blog artists who were doing the same thing. I got to meet so many fans and really got to practice telling a story through art. When I started writing, I wasn't exactly a great writer, just kind of playing on a lot of anime tropes. But as things developed, I started to get a better feel for where I wanted to take the character in the story. But Octavia's story is a whole other thing. Maybe I'll do a video on that after I finish up her story as well. But this video is about me. When did I start doing scene interpretations? I think it might have been around Season 4. In celebration of the Season 4 premiere, I drew an interpretation of Princess Twilight. I think at first I was doing it as a challenge and for practice, and my own little fandom was starting to level out as my views stabilized. They weren't really full-on scene interpretations, as they were just pics inspired by each episode as they premiered. I was deep into it now, catching every week and looking forward to seeing what was next, and preparing to draw something every episode. Season 4, Episode 12, Pinky Pride, is kind of where I first try a full-on scene interpretation, I think. Pinky and Cheese at the mic. Then, a few weeks later, another straight scene interpretation with Philly Vanilli, and another after that with Twilight Time. I even put the little hub logo on the pic to make it look more like a screenshot rather than just a drawing. But boy, did those always take time, and I think it was more interesting just to see my interpretation of the characters rather than the scenes. I think people just wanted to see costumes and character designs. By the end of that season, I had started to get to know more and more artists. I started doing fan art for other artists. I started taking requests. I joined a collaborative folio called the Spotlight Special, which featured a lot of smaller but upcoming artists, many of whom have made huge names for themselves now. I started doing the 30-minute challenge. I drew every day for like 3 years, and I got good. I got real good. It's exactly as they say, the best way to get better is just to practice and practice hard. It's a long grind, but I'd say it's worth it. During that time, around the holidays of 2014, was my first big break, so to speak. At least I thought so. This was my moment with the big kids, and the thing that really boosted my confidence, but not without some struggle first. I had applied for and been accepted into the My Little Sweetheart collaborative art book. I was just confident enough to try out for it, but not confident enough to actually feel like my work was good enough to be put in a book. I got to hang out with a lot of other artists, and boy did I pester them with constant requests for critiques and tips for getting better. I'm pretty sure I actually pissed off some of them. To those artists, I'm sorry, but I thank you deeply for what you taught me. It was at this time I learned the most valuable lesson of my art career. I kept asking for help from artists that were better than me. I kept asking and asking, thinking that if they helped improve my work, that I would finally be good enough. Little tips here, red line there, and at the point where I had annoyed everyone and really showed how much of a newbie I was told this. People aren't going to buy this book to see a professional piece of art. They're going to buy this book to see a piece made by John Fox. Obviously paraphrasing a little bit, and I feel like it was just said to shut me up, but in that moment, I gained the confidence and the assurance I needed to finally move forward. In that moment, I realized what being an artist was about to me. My style wasn't perfect, my proportions were all off, all my faces look weird, I draw stiff poses, but this was me, and people liked that, and I didn't even realize that. Not that I never improved. I started to reflect more on what people liked and what I needed to do better, and I worked at it. I drew more inspiration from those artists and other artists and kept trying. I kept doing 30-minute challenges and weekly episode pictures with a newfound sense of purpose. Luckily, this was back in the time where I had the time to keep trying that stuff. I was still a college student that barely studied, but plenty of free time to do whatever. So I focused on art among other creative outlets. Through all that, we made it to season 5. I started doing anime screenshot scene interpretations. I even started adding subtitles to make it more like an anime screenshot. I still kept doing the 30-minute challenges and Ask Human Octavia and requests and collaborations. I missed the time when I had time to do that. I did a complete season of screenshots. I kept collaborating more, people started commissioning me, but I was still just doing this for fun. I kept doing it because I liked the challenge and because people liked what was coming out of it. And for the 5th anniversary, I went back to that first picture I drew. I did one of those draw this again memes. I used the same designs, but now I could see just how much I'd improved. Looking at it now, I still have a long way to go, but I was loving it. I finished Season 5 with the best I'd ever felt. People loved my art. My Season 5 finale spawned a new side series for me, Nightmare War, which I greatly enjoy doing and which is also headed into a finale now. I might do a video about that too, if YouTube will let me. For Season 6, I went back to doing mostly topical picks, with the occasional scene interpretation. For the most part, it was just easier to draw a character or a moment from the episode rather than a whole scene, and it allowed me a little more freedom to be more interpretive or expressive with ideas. But then Season 7, I started doing the screenshot redraws again. It was something of a nice challenge, and working around the restriction of having to draw the original scene really was the fun part. There was still plenty of room for interpretation and trying new things, but also I just really liked the idea that maybe there's an alternate universe where My Little Pony is an anime, and I'm just taking screen caps from that alternate universe and posting them here. Season 8 continued the trend, establishing more internal rules and consistency and really making my own version of the My Little Pony universe. With the added challenge of so many new characters and trying to fit it into that universe, it was a season of learning and growing. And finally, we're here at Season 9, where I've taken all of the lessons I've learned and really put it to the test. Been more ambitious with backgrounds, with character designs, lighting, composition, motion. I've really filled out this world. I'm really proud of how a lot of the picks came out this season, and as I draw these final few picks, I look back and see just how far I've come. I've made many mistakes along the way, but I've also made just as many friends. As per tradition, I guess, since this is probably the last time I'll do something like this in a long time, I streamed all day for this. 5 pictures in total, 4 for the 2-part season finale and 1 for the epilogue. Oh, right. Episode review first. It was a pretty grand finale. It feels like they used up the last of their budget to really pump up the action and really tie everything together in a way that would be satisfying. And while I can't definitively say it was necessarily satisfying, I think epic is a good word to describe it. Really pulling out all the stops to make a big battle and tie together all of the plot threads they set up through the earlier seasons. Almost felt like an MLP movie. I think I'm still coming off the high of enjoying the finale for the first time, so I don't really have a lot to say. I thought it was a great finale and a fitting end to the series. Twilight has learned everything she needed to and demonstrated it. I'm not really sure about the whole Grogar was actually Discord thing. And I'm not sure I fully believe or even understand his motivation. I don't think that was actually a very good plot twist. It just felt like a really sudden and random resolution. But maybe it's for the better that we get to see the villains we know fight Twilight rather than a new one with barely established powers. The whole Grogar thing seemed totally unnecessary, really. If they had just used some other plot device to force the villains to work together, it probably would have worked just as well. And at the end of the day, the magic of friendship prevails. Hooray! I don't mean that in a facetious way. It was certainly predictable that the magic of friendship would win, but The build up to it was great. Twilight students relaying her lessons about friendship and reuniting everybody was a great moment that really brought it all together. The epilogue was okay. Not a big fan of the new character designs, but what are you gonna do? I like how it came full circle. The same mistakes that Twilight made are the same mistakes that Luster is making. The same mistakes that probably many of us are making. And learning from that mistake and teaching others to learn from it. I like the hopeful message about friends staying together. They all take strides and work to stay together, and that's really something we should do, something I should really do. I kind of like how they're leaving an opening for the next generation to come and learn the magic for themselves. I don't know if there will ever be another fandom like the Bronies, but I hope there will be. Not all of the negative stuff and the drama that happened, but all of the good. All of the inspiration and creativity brought out in a group of people, the amazing collaborations, the wonderful art and music and stories, and the community it sowed and nourished. I hope I can feel this way again about the next thing I head to. Never lose that inspiration. Remember the world being as bright as Equestria is. And on to the Pick of the Week reflections. By now, at this point in the video, the first and probably the second pictures have already gone by. For the first pick, of course, I had to do something with the 3 villains transformed. Mainly, I just wanted to draw Chrysalis. I mean, Tyrek just got bigger. There wasn't really a need to draw him much different aside from, I don't know, maybe more muscles. Cozy Glow was also just kind of uninteresting to design. Or maybe it's just because she's not that interesting. I kind of went for an evil princess kind of look for her. This shot doesn't really show off the 3 of them, but I kind of hope it conveys the idea of their designs well enough. Had fun with Chrysalis, kind of went fantasy crazy with it. Started with the gauntlets. I like the metallic pearlescent kind of color, inspired by the hoof covers, and then just kind of branched from there for her new design. Also good to establish it here, as I'm probably going to need these designs for the next few picks. For the second pick, I wanted to do a really dynamic battle scene. Starlight and Chrysalis are certainly 2 favorites, and it was a cool chance to try something very environmental. The wind blowing, the movement, the character designs. Kind of a simpler scene, made easy by the snow everywhere, but I had fun with it. For the third pick, the first one of episode 25, I wanted to do that scene where Twilight was jumping between the rocks to reach Tyrek and punch him in the face. Obviously took some inspiration from Naruto and other shonen anime. As with any motion, you kind of have to think about where the character was and where they're going. So the line of balance in her pose here is slightly shifted to indicate direction, her pose to indicate some kind of energy being pent up, and lots of motion blur and shallow depth of field to increase the drama of the scene. For the fourth pick, of course I had to do the donut shawarma scene. I love it. At the end of the day, we don't need some big grand gesture, we just want a quiet little moment with our friends. I wanted to convey that feeling in this scene. Just that feeling of pure bliss and happiness that comes with being with friends. Their smiles, their eyes, very little details, maybe just a few strokes of the pen, but I wanted to convey a lot of emotion with just those few lines. It's kind of the art of anime and minimalism in general. I hope that comes across. And finally, we're probably coming up to the finishing touches on the last pick now. Of course, I had to draw the main 6 all grown up, backlit by the sun setting on the end of an era. I already draw them all as young adults, and typically in anime people kind of stay looking like that until they're really old. I wanted to show their age a little bit, like dulled hair or more defined features. Of course, Twilight looks totally different, but in my version, she's still just Twilight. She has full-on alicorn ears now, which I've actually never drawn her with until now. And of course, a big handsome spike. Character design wasn't particularly tough since most of them were wearing something already, but I still tried to tell their story through their designs, just as I have from the beginning, just as the original show artists were probably trying to do. What that story is, I'll leave up to you. Kind of the beauty of art, really. It can tell a story without words, and I have many more stories to tell. And with that, my final call to action. Let's make something wonderful, everyone. Let that feeling of inspiration well up and come out as something awesome, as Rainbow Dash might put it. Let the memories of all the good times we've shared with this show carry you forward to a brighter future.
Let the rainbow remind you that together we will all